My name is Ijeoma. I was born in Aba, Nigeria, and raised under a roof where success had only one face, my elder brother's. My parents adored him. Tall, articulate, and a medical doctor. Everything I wasn't. I was the weird one, the girl who doodled in the corners of her notebooks and spoke more to books than to people. From my teenage years, I knew I would never follow the traditional path my parents wanted for me. But what I didn't expect was that the very people who were meant to support me would one day call me an embarrassment in front of a room full of strangers. But life has its way of folding, doesn't it? Because just when they laughed, someone in the room stood up. And what they said silenced everyone. Growing up, I was the child who always colored outside the lines. Not because I didn't know the rules, but because the lines felt too tight. I loved stories, I loved computers, and I loved building things. At 15, I designed a basic website for my mother's catering business. But instead of appreciation, she looked at the messy HTML page and said, "You always waste your time with this nonsense. Will this feed you?" My father didn't even glance at it. He only asked, "Did you come second in class again?" Second was never good enough. Nothing I did was. When I got into university, I chose to study computer science. My parents were disappointed. Medicine or law, my father said, eyes hard. Anything else is a waste. I still remember the look on his face when I told him I wasn't changing my course. It was the first time he looked at me like I was invisible. University was hard, not because of the courses, but because I worked part-time as a campus blogger to survive. My parents had said, "Since you want to be stubborn, sponsor yourself." And I did. I hustled. I wrote tech reviews, managed 3 blogs, and sold digital marketing services on the side. I learned SEO, coding, and even built an app to help local students find affordable textbooks. By my final year, the app had been downloaded 50,000 times across 3 universities. Still, I didn't tell my parents. What was the point? After graduation, while my classmates hunted for jobs, I built a startup with 2 friends. We called it CocoFind, a platform that helps small Nigerian retailers take their shops online. At first, it struggled. We had no funding, no connections. I lived in a 1-room apartment in Ikeja, and sometimes, dinner was just Gary. But I believed in the product. 2 years in, we got our first investor, a woman from Ghana who had read about us through a tech blog I had guest written for. She gave us $50,000 in seed funding. That changed everything. We hired a small team, built better servers, and rebranded. Within 6 months, over 2,000 retailers had signed up. I was invited to speak at the Lagos Tech Women Conference. I wore my only good blazer and stood on a stage, trembling but proud. When they called me one of Africa's youngest rising CEOs in tech, I cried backstage. Still, I told no one in my family. Until the party. My parents were hosting a New Year's Eve get-together in ABA. They insisted I attend, saying maybe this time you'll behave like a proper lady. I wore a modest gown, brought a bottle of imported wine, and tried not to feel like a stranger in my own home. The guests were mostly their church friends and old schoolmates. People dressed in lace and igbadas, talking about promotions, new cars, and children studying in Canada. I sat quietly in a corner, sipping my drink and smiling politely. That's when it started. My father, tipsy from palm wine, waved his hand in my direction and said loudly to a guest, "That one? She's the embarrassing one. Refused to study medicine. Just doing computer things. I don't even know what she does, SEF." Everyone laughed. I smiled, but something cracked inside me. Then my mother added, "We don't even mention her when people ask about our children. Her brother, Chuka, now that is a child to be proud of. A real doctor in the UK. But this one, she even wore sneakers to church last month." More laughter. I wanted to melt into the floor. I excused myself and walked toward the balcony, blinking away tears. I told myself to stay calm, that I was used to this. But it still hurt. And then I heard a woman's voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me, did you just say she is your daughter?" The room quieted a bit. I turned and saw a tall woman in a gold dress standing up from the table. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. My father said, "Yes." "Unfortunately." The woman walked toward me, smiling warmly. "I thought I recognized you. You're Ijeoma Ease, right? The CEO of CocoFind?" The room went silent. My father blinked. "What?" She extended her hand to me. "I'm Auntie Maureen. I'm an investor with Gold Invest Capital. I've been following your company since last year. You're doing phenomenal work. The way you're helping local traders digitize? Groundbreaking." My hands shook as I took hers. "Thank you, Ma." She turned to my parents. "You should be proud. Do you have any idea how many young people she's helped empower? This girl is going to change Africa's economy. And here you are calling her an embarrassment?" I had never seen my parents look so stunned. She turned back to me. "I'd love to connect after this party. We're planning a youth entrepreneurship panel for the African Union, and your voice should be there." And just like that, the room that once laughed at me fell completely silent. That night, I left early. I didn't wait for apologies, none came anyway. But I left with my head high. 2 weeks later, I was invited to speak in Addis Ababa. When I returned, I sent my parents a signed copy of Forbes Africa, where I'd been featured. They called me the next day. My mother cried. My father apologized. But something in me had changed. Not bitter, but stronger. It took the voice of a stranger to open their eyes. But I no longer lived for their validation. I had learned that sometimes, the people closest to you will not understand your path. And that's okay. Because your value is not defined by the people who fail to see it. It's defined by the lives you touch, the courage you show, and the legacy you build. Sometimes, the best revenge is success whispered in the ears of those who once called you embarrassing. The silence after Auntie Maureen's words still echoes in my memory. It wasn't the kind of silence you get when people are confused, it was the heavy, shamed kind. The kind that wraps itself around people who've suddenly realized they've been clapping with the wrong hands. I left the party without looking back. My feet didn't carry anger, only release. For the first time, I didn't care what my parents thought. That night marked a turning point, not just in how the world saw me, but how I saw myself. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly. Auntie Maureen introduced me to a network of African female entrepreneurs, mentors, and angel investors. These weren't women who asked you to shrink, they asked you to speak up. I got invited to a conference in Addis Ababa hosted by the African Union, where I was to speak on a panel about women in tech and the future of African commerce. I remember standing before the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces, and knowing I belonged there. But it wasn't just the stage I stood on that mattered, it was the power of finally owning my story. While in Addis Ababa, I was approached by a Rwandan investor who wanted to replicate CocoFind's model in East Africa. We signed a deal in March. By June, our platform had expanded to 5 more countries, with over 10,000 active vendors. Still, I hadn't spoken to my parents, not beyond the awkward call my mother made after the Forbes feature. It wasn't a real apology, more of a whispered, "We didn't know," followed by silence. But life, as it always does, created space for reckoning. In July, my brother Chuka returned from the UK for a short visit. Our parents threw a homecoming party, once again inviting half the town. But this time, when I arrived, something was different. People whispered as I walked in, not mockery this time, but curiosity. My father looked up from the main table, cleared his throat, and said, "Ah, the CEO herself has arrived." It was awkward, forced, but I nodded politely. Chuka hugged me tightly, smiling wide. Ijeoma, I've been reading about you non-stop, he said. You're doing big things. I'm proud of you, sis. And for a moment, just a brief moment, I let the warmth in. During dinner, my mother pulled me aside and asked, "Why didn't you tell us everything you were doing?" I looked at her directly and said, "Because you wouldn't have listened." She didn't deny it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Thank you," I replied. "But I didn't succeed because you believed in me. I succeeded because I believed in myself." Sometimes, it's not hate that kills dreams, it's neglect. It's being told you're not enough simply because your light doesn't shine the way they expect. But the truth is, you don't need to be seen by everyone to succeed. All you need is to see yourself. Weeks after the second party, I received an invitation to speak at the National Youth Empowerment Summit in Abuja. This time, I didn't hesitate. I knew what I wanted to say. I didn't just want to talk about entrepreneurship or how to build a startup, I wanted to talk about identity, rejection, and resilience. On the morning of the event, I stepped onto the stage wearing a vibrant Ankara blazer, symbolic of my African roots, paired with a confident smile I had earned through fire. The room was filled with students, young entrepreneurs, even government officials. I looked into the sea of expectant faces and began. I was once called an embarrassment by my own parents at a party in front of strangers. I didn't fit into the picture of success they imagined. I wasn't a lawyer, or doctor, or banker. I was a tech girl with no pedigree, no inheritance, only a dream. There was a stillness in the room. But here's what I've learned: the world will not always clap for you when you start. Sometimes, it will boo. But if you stay true to your path, even the loudest critics will one day have no choice but to listen. The applause was thunderous. A few students cried. And for the first time, I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore, it belonged to every young person who had ever been laughed at, misunderstood, or overlooked. After the summit, a girl approached me, barely 17, with tears in her eyes. "My father wants me to study law, but I love robotics," she said. "Hearing you, I think I'll apply for that tech scholarship I've been hiding." I smiled and hugged her. "Do it afraid," I told her. "But do it." It wasn't just the girl who was moved. That same night, I got a text from my father. "Your mother and I watched your speech online. We're proud of you. Truly. We didn't understand before. But now we see it. You've made us rethink everything." It took me a while to respond. Not because I was angry, but because I finally felt whole. Not because they approved, but because I no longer needed them to. Life has a cruel yet poetic way of turning things around. The same people who once called you embarrassing might one day quote your words. The same rooms that once ignored you might one day stand when you walk in. But here's the truth I want to leave you with. Not every seed blooms where it is planted. Sometimes, you bloom when you are uprooted, discarded, and left to grow wild on your own. Sometimes, the soil of rejection becomes the birthplace of resilience. Never let the absence of applause make you question your rhythm. Let your journey be your loudest answer. Because one day, someone might point at you in disbelief and say, "Isn't that the award-winning CEO?" And you'll smile, because you know the road you walked to get there.